There are new VA horrors unveiled, combined now with another horror, opioid addiction in the United States. A new expose revealing the agency has been overprescribing painkillers, which fuels addiction. And then there is an abandonment of soldiers as they battle for their lives and their addiction. Despite being the largest civilian government agency with a projected 2017 budget of over $180 billion, the VA has been hampered by an onslaught of bureaucratic obstacles, leaving veterans fighting to survive, literally. Here to discuss is Concerned Veterans for America Vice President Dan Caldwell, excuse me, and former military police sergeant Christopher Neiweem. Gentlemen, good to see you. Dan, first to you. This is just extraordinary. I can kind of understand, I think, not excuse, but understand what happened, which is that vets come into hospitals for one reason or other because the VA is so poorly run they can't get what they need, so the doctors just throw out painkillers. Is that pretty much what happens?
Somewhat. It actually usually begins within the military, is that starting while many of these troops are in the military, when they're injured, whether they're wounded in combat, injured in training, you know, it's being in an infantry or in a combat arms possession. It's a very physically demanding profession, so there's a lot of injuries. You see a prescription, overprescription of painkillers, and that's usually where it starts, and then it continues when these veterans are handed over the VA system. There's been an overprescription of opioids and other medications for a long time.
Without an attempt to break the addiction. That's the problem.
Yes.
I mean, these guys get addicted to painkillers while they're in the military, and then once they're out, the VA continues with the addiction. Have you seen it in your work? Have you seen a lot more addicted vets?
A Marine that I served with, an absolutely outstanding Marine who I served with in Iraq, was injured in the service. He injured his knee actually while trying to become an officer. He tried to move from enlisted officer. The VA put him on a painkiller regimen. He's actually out in the Phoenix VA. He missed some appointments, couldn't get his prescription refilled. One thing led to another. He actually got addicted to heroin. Unfortunately, there were some side effects of that. And as of today, he's sitting in jail. It is a really unfortunate situation that is unfortunately far too common across the country.
Well, Christopher, we started out by mentioning, I didn't realize it was the largest civilian operation in U.S. government. Hundreds of thousands of workers, $170 billion this year is how much we pay for. With all that money, can't we at least provide something for addicted vets?
You know, the Department of Veterans Affairs, it has the largest budget next to the DOD, and it still has the biggest black eye, which it gave itself 2 years ago with the Phoenix VA scandal, and it still has not been able to repair the brand despite record funding, record support from the veteran community. I've worked well. Dan's a good friend of mine, done a lot of hard work on this with Concerned Veterans of America. Many other veterans groups have been working and supporting the VA more than none other, and it still has not gotten traction on this. And despite all of these issues with opioids and overdoses, the VA has the funding to provide the care, and they're just not getting the job done.
Well, Christopher, sticking with you, there are 144 VA hospitals in America. There are thousands of facilities, outpatient facilities. There are a bunch of different operations that they have, some of which are run by really fine people. I know some VA doctors. My son's in the military. He's gone to a VA hospital that he happens to like a lot. But why not do the Trump thing? Say, okay, give veterans a choice. Give them a voucher. Let them choose where they want to go. If they choose a VA hospital, fine. If they don't, maybe it'll eventually have to close down because it's one of the bad ones. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, President-elect Trump's biggest problem is that he's right. I mean, he's right on this issue, and we do need to have avenues for privatization, and people get very sensitive about them in the veteran community, but the fact is, we already have privatization. It doesn't work correctly. It's called non-VA care. VA doesn't get it right. So we absolutely need to provide private care where the VA can't provide it in a timely manner. They still are not doing it, and so we absolutely do need to look at care where the VA can still hold the veteran's file and be in control, but we can get veterans in to see doctors so they're not languishing out there and suffering, as Dan described earlier.
Dan, what about the voucher idea? Are you for it?
We're for more choice. I don't think the voucher is the best way to deliver that choice, but ultimately we agree with President-elect Trump that every veteran who uses the VA and has access to VA benefits should have the ability to choose whether or not to use care in the private sector. They chose to serve their country. They should be able to choose their doctor. It's a very simple concept, and unfortunately out here in Washington, D.C., as Chris can tell you, there's a lot of resistance out here in the Iron Triangle.
Yeah,
you have some special interest
bureaucrats.
groups.
They've got their
VA
own self-interest. They don't want the VA to die because they are bureaucrats, and it's the bureaucrats we want to get out of the way. We want to put as little distance between the doctors and the hospitals and the patient and the vets as possible. Get the bureaucrats, squeeze the bureaucrats out. Drain the swamp is another expression that I've heard used. Can't remember from where. Dan Caldwell, Christopher Neiweem, good to see you both. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work, too.
Thank you.